So without further ado, let's look at the sensors that there are available to use. So first up, we have desk PIR sensors. PIR stands for passive infrared. These are little sensors, probably 2 times the size of a pound coin, that sit underneath desks, and they monitor heat and motion to tell you whether or not someone is sat in front of them. So these are primarily used on desks or phone booths, private meeting areas, focus areas, that kind of thing. And they tell you when they're in use throughout the day and for how long, but don't pass any personal information. So it doesn't say who's there, it just says that someone's there. Next up, we have footfall counters. So these are used to kind of count how many people are going in and out of a space throughout the day. So cafeterias, thoroughfare areas, any kind of shared space where you want to get an understanding of how they're used throughout the day. This is where these come in. And then the same, or well, similar, with room counting sensors. These tell you how many people are in a meeting room at any one time. They sit on the ceiling and tell you whether an 8-person meeting room has 6 people in or 4 people. And then there's also room presence sensors, which work in the same way that desk PRs do. They just tell you whether or not anyone is in that room. And we'll come on to when is best to deploy the 2 of them in a moment. But finally, the fourth kind of sensor that we bring into our solutions on a regular basis is the environmental sensors. The one that you can see on screen captures CO2, temperature, and humidity data all through the one sensor. There are separate sensors which do noise, but those 3 are the primary ones that we deal with because they kind of impact cognitive ability, drowsiness throughout the day, and currently are very important because they also have a big impact on safety in terms of COVID-19 and making sure that air quality is up to scratch and up to the standards that people want to be safe. So now that we've got the sensors sorted, I'm going to take you through some kind of key considerations to take into account when you're in the planning stage of your study. And the best piece of advice I think that I could give you is to work backwards from your goals when you're discussing sensors. So think to yourself, what decisions do I want to be making in a year's time? What changes do I want to be able to make? Or how do I want the workplace to be able to flex or move? And what data do I actually need to get these conclusions? Once you've got an idea of the metrics that you'll want to be studying, the key data points, that's when you can look at your floor plans and the space itself and decide what sensors are best to put where to actually get that data that you require. It's very tempting to look at your floor plans and go, boom, let's put sensors everywhere. But the truth is you might be oversaturated in data, might not use all of it. So from an ease of use and efficiency and also a cost point of view, it's best to be very critical and evaluate your thought processes at every stage of this process. Building on this, this feeds into like the granularity point that I've got next. And I've got a couple of examples of where the same sensors or different sensors can be used depending on the use case you've got in mind or the challenge you've got in mind. So say you had a bank of 100 collaborative desks that people can come down, like touch down on, use whenever they want. And you want to know, firstly, one person might want to know how often they're used throughout the day, just on average. Someone else might want to know exactly which desks are being used throughout that period. If you just want to get a general picture of how these desks are being used, you don't need to put a sensor on each one. You can probably hit 50 of them and then extrapolate that data outwards to cover the whole bank of them. But if you did want to know which 50 can I get rid of now, then you want to put a desk PIR sensor on every one of them. Similarly with meeting rooms, you kind of want to look at the potential you have to make changes to the rooms, and that might dictate which sensor is best suited. So if you've got a series of 4-person meeting rooms, realistically, they can't be repurposed to much else other than potentially a private office or a kind of focus area. So you just want to know if that's in use, because 1 or 2 or 3 people in a 4-person meeting room is still a pretty effective use of that room. It's when you start getting to the larger rooms, such as the 8, 10, 12-person rooms, that's when you want to counter. Because if you can see that you have a series of 12-person meeting rooms that are being used throughout the day by only 2 people, cool. That's a serious opportunity for optimization in the workplace. They can be repurposed and you can use your space far more effectively. And this is kind of similar with communal areas as well, such as cafeterias. If you have a cafeteria with loads of tables and benches and stuff, you might be tempted to put desk sensors throughout that, little PIR sensors. But realistically, not many people want to know that. It's more important just to identify the busy periods throughout the day, the trends throughout the week. And for that, one footfall counter in the doorway would get the job done far more effectively and efficiently. Moving on now to kind of considerations in placement and staying with the cafeteria example, one thing that you need to consider is this space itself actually fixed? is it going to stay the same as it's mapped on the floor plans? And typically in a cafeteria environment, you might be able to kind of like move the tables around to sit with who you want to. So it might not end up matching exactly what is on the dashboard. So then that's another reason to use the footfall counter in that area. So you need to kind of think what's going to happen in the space in the short term, and will it work with the sensors we have in place? Similarly, it pays to be very critical of the space that you have in terms of the actual physical layout of it. So if you've got very high ceilings, for example, or quite wide doorways that people could potentially kind of walk down the edge of and be avoided by the sensor, or if the sensor's too high and it won't pick them up, that's something you need to be able to be aware of. And that's why on-site visits are very important very early on, so that these problems can be addressed, identified, and alternative solutions with different sensors can be then put into place to actually get that solution working. And the final point on this slide is maximizing longevity of placement. And this kind of refers only to the desk PIR sensors in terms of just not putting them on the very edge of your desk where it's likely to get knocked off. You want to place them probably, if you're holding in your hand, an elbow depth into the table, facing towards you, make sure they're not twisted the wrong way around, and make sure there's nothing blocking their line of sight, because that will just mean that someone can be sat there and it won't pick them up. So quite simple things, but very, very important to make sure that the sensors are able to do their job best. So I'm just going to quickly address a question we've had come in. How do you use footfall counters to not double count people as they come and go throughout the day? So the way the sensor works is it has cameras which divide the doorway into 3 areas, so 1, 2, 3, or a 3, 2, 1. So someone going in will go 1, 2, 3, and that counts as an in, and then someone coming out will go 3, 2, 1, and that counts as an out. And it keeps a tally of in versus out throughout the day. And if there's more than one entrance or exit, you can put sensors on both of them and kind of silo the area off. So one in and one out through the separate area is also worked out through the system there as well.